Why did Pontius Pilate sentence Jesus to death, according to game theory? From a game theory perspective, the case of Jesus of Nazareth can be understood through the lens of the prisoner's dilemma, both in its classic form and its repeated or iterated version. Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea from 26 to 36 AD, faced a choice. On one hand, he could act in accordance with his own judgment and logic. After interrogating Jesus, he publicly declared that he found no guilt in him. Logically, then, he should have released him. And in the long run, such an independent and just decision might have helped Pilate hold onto power longer than he ultimately did. On the other hand, Pilate had an ongoing political relationship with Caiaphas, the high priest and head of the Sanhedrin, the highest religious and judicial authority in Judea. According to the Gospel of John, it was Caiaphas who first explicitly proposed that Jesus should be put to death, especially after the rising of Lazarus led many people to believe in him. From the perspective of public choice theory, the Jewish authorities acted rationally, economically and selfishly, fearing a loss of power. Pilate's second option, the one he ultimately chose, was to sentence Jesus to death. As the Gospels describe, he saw that he was getting nowhere and that the unrest was growing. He feared a riot, especially with Passover approaching, the largest Jewish festival, when crowds were already gathering in Jerusalem. From his interrogation, Pilate understood that Jesus had no political backing. Jesus spoke of a kingdom not of the world, even saying that if it were, his followers would fight for him. So Pilate knew that in a worldly sense, Jesus stood alone. On the other side stood the Sanhedrin and Caiaphas, with whom Pilate had likely maintained a working relationship for years. Caiaphas helped prevent unrest and identify rebels, while Pilate maintained order and the status quo in Judea. Notably, both men lost their positions around the same time in 36 AD, suggesting that their fates were linked. So what does the prisoner's dilemma tell us here? In the classic version, two prisoners, lacking trust, choose to cooperate with the prosecutor, fearing the other will betray them first, even though mutual cooperation would yield a better outcome. Pilate could have cooperated with truth, with his own judgment, demonstrating authority by releasing a man he deemed innocent. But he didn't trust that path. Famously, he asked, "What is truth?" And despite warnings, even from his wife, he chose the safer, though likely short-term options, continuing cooperation with Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin. And when we consider the iterated prisoner's dilemma, repeated interaction over time, the logic becomes even clearer. In such scenarios, strategies like tit for tat dominate. Pilate feared retaliation, not just unrest, but the loss of his position. At the time, Emperor Tiberius formally ruled Rome, but real power was exercised by his minister Lucius Seianus, who later conspired against the emperor and was executed. When Seianus fell, Pilate's political foundation weakened. The Jewish authorities knew of Pilate's association with Seianus, and warned that releasing Jesus would show disloyalty to Caesar. So Pilate feared a tit-for-tat response. and that retaliation would cost him his power. In the end, game theory helps explain Pilate's decision. Like in the prisoner's dilemma, it was likely not the optimal choice, even for him, but one made out of fear of the worst-case scenario. Ironically, the worst-case scenario wasn't avoided. Pilate lost his position just a few years later, in 36 AD. Of course, with game theory, which focuses on patterns, not anomalies, we do not account for the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And that changes everything. This was Economics in One Lesson about economics, taxes, and game theory. Thank you very much.